Welcome to the podcast where we talk about the Philippine property market, real estate investments, and the trends shaping the future of our cities. Today, we're taking a deeper look at the Philippine property market, particularly the debate around Metro Manila's condominium supply, the impact on the real estate of POGOs, and where the next investment opportunities might be. In the recent year, analysts and experts have reported rising residential condominium inventory in Metro Manila, higher office vacancies after the exit of POGO companies, and shifting demand across different property sectors. To help us understand what's really happening in the Manila residential condo market, I'm joined today by Joey Roy Bondoc, Director and Head of Research at Colliers, Philippines. Joey, thank you for joining us today.
Yes, hello Richard. Nice to see you again.
Yes, it's been years since we had our last interview together.
Yes.
But before we begin, this episode is brought to you by iAcademy, one of the leading schools for real estate management in the Philippines. iAcademy has consistently produced top-performing graduates in the real estate brokers, appraisers, and licensure examination. In the 2025 Real Estate Brokers Licensure Exam, the school achieved 94.29% passing rate, making it the top-performing school in the Philippines. In the 2024 Real Estate Appraiser Licensure Exam, iAcademy also recorded an impressive 97.62% passing rate, continuing its strong record in professional real estate education. If you are interested in building a career in real estate brokerage, appraisal, or consultancy, you can explore the real estate management programs here at iAcademy. Also, we are currently shooting this podcast from the Q Studios. They are currently located in Tech Zone Building in Malugay, Makati. Okay, so Joey, let's get on to business.
Yes.
In several interviews, you've mentioned that Metro Manila condominium inventory life reached more than 10 years at one point,
That's
which
correct.
sparked a lot of discussion in the industry. So some people already interpreted this as a warning for the residential market, no? So, in your opinion, is this something that is temporary or does it come to a deeper structural issue in terms of Manila condominium market?
Well, definitely, it is not for the long haul. Because if there is one thing that I want to highlight, Richard, about that figure, whether it's 7, 8, 10, 13 years, it's the fact that it can actually change in a single quarter. Meaning, for example, if I mention to you right now that in the fourth quarter of 2025, it was 7.9 years to fully sell the unsold condominiums in Metro Manila. By the first quarter of 2026, that can significantly improve, meaning significantly decline. However, it can also significantly increase if we see a substantial decline in terms of take-up in the Metro Manila condominium sector, because you have to note that 2026 there will be substantial new completion across the capital region. So once those are turned over, then you don't have buyer. So that's where lower take-up or absorption is seen. So that will likely raise that remaining inventory life in Metro Manila.
Okay, but what type of event or what type of scenario would decrease the inventory life in Metro Manila?
Basically, it's just a very good take-up in the market. But is there a specific event that can help improve take-up? I'll take it from our previous example. So, if you look at the remaining inventory life, for example, first quarter 2025, second quarter of 2025, in fact, it peaked at about 13.4 years, right? Second quarter of 2025. So, you asked me what event, for example, what did the developers do when they started to see the rising number of unsold, ready for occupancy units?
They
in
had
Metro
flexible
Manila?
payment terms.
Exactly.
lower-
So you have lease to own.
Yes.
So
Early
I'm not sure if I
move-in.
can name some developers, but I'll name some of their programs. For example, DMCI, rent to own, up to
Yes.
36 months. 36th month, you decide if you want to buy it, 60% of what you paid will be deducted from the total contract price. I understand that RLC residences also 120 months rent to own for some of their ready for occupancy completed projects. Not only that, if you go around Metro Manila, you'll see certain developers offering up to 60% discount if you pay spot cash. So, as a result, we have seen a substantial take-up, meaning net sales in Metro Manila starting third quarter of 2025. And that has really resulted in a significantly lower remaining inventory life. From about 13.4 years, it's down now to about 7.9. That's as of fourth quarter of 2025. And
That
again,
actually makes a lot of sense as
Yeah.
well, because like strategies like this would address affordability issues as well,
That's right.
which is one of main factor why we do have an oversupply, or really I like to call it inventory, having reached a certain year of inventory
correct.
life
But
rather than oversupply.
you mentioned, just to add, Richard, you mentioned affordability. You're correct. Why is this a very important factor to consider? Because the central bank has been aggressive in cutting interest rates, right?
Yes.
Where the basic policy rate is only about 4.25%. The central bank has cut basic policy rates by about 225 basis points since August of 2024. But the basic policy rate is very low, 4.25. What are your mortgage rates right now? If you take a 5-year loan, 7.7, 7.8, right?
You'll be lucky to
it's
have 7 or 8.
Exactly. So it's still elevated. And we believe that this is one of the major reasons why, investors right now are a little bit wary to take out a loan. Also, previously, Richard, if you look at pre-POGO period,
Yeah.
pre-pandemic, for example. So that was 2017 up to 2019, right? And you probably experienced this. You sold a lot of units perhaps during that period. That was the POGO heyday in Metro Manila. Remember, that was a period wherein in a year we would see condominium pre-selling sales reaching 59,000 units in a single year. And why? So the project is still under construction, under pre-selling, it's still under the inventory of the developer. What was their marketing plan or strategy at the time? They tell their buyers, you just set aside your monthly coffee budget, monthly
Right.
Starbucks, CBTL budget. You can pay 10, 12, 14,000 a month, monthly amortization. The problem is, once that loan enters the bank financing, you now see balloon financing, right? So your payment now soars from 14,000 previously to what? 40, 50,000 pesos. So if you're an investor, you'll probably be rejected by the bank for your loan. And then, eventually you realize that 40, 50,000 is just too much. If you're earning how much? Say 70, 80,000 gross. I mean, that will be very difficult for you. So,
but I also have to say that people really made good money with this strategy. Even
that is
me
correct.
personally, like flipping condos
Definitely.
pre-pandemic, it was the best strategy there is,
Yes.
because like the prices were not really that
Yes.
high. So there was a lot of room for capital
Yes,
appreciation.
yeah.
No?
And not just capital appreciation, Richard, even rental yields.
Oh
I
my
mean,
God,
that was
yes.
a period, right? That was a period wherein, I'll give you an example. In the Bay Area, a studio unit, you can lease out a studio unit, say 20, 25 square meters for 1,100 pesos per square. And right now, you'll be lucky if you can lease it out, because we looked at certain projects during our previous presentation. You can be lucky if you can lease it out at about 700 pesos per square meter.
That is correct. Better than nothing. But what is the reason why you've consistently said that Philippines is not experiencing a real estate bubble, even with the elevated condo supply and higher office vacancies these days?
So it's a very interesting question, a very good question, in fact, because if you look at the condominium sector, yes, there are about 30,000 unsold RFO condominium units in Metro Manila. But again, what we want to highlight here is that it's not the entire Metro Manila, for example, that is experiencing a condo oversupply or a condominium slowdown. Why? If you look at the RFO segment, again, just this sector, ready for occupancy, the three major business hubs, I'm talking about Makati, CBD, Fort Bonifacio, and Ortigas Center, they only cover less than 2% of the unsold RFOs in Metro Manila. Again, the problem is while these three major business districts are recording very strong take up and have a negligible share to total unsold RFOs in Metro Manila, when you go to Quezon City, Manila, Pasig, Pasay Paranaque, that's where you see huge number of unsold ready for occupancy condominium units, especially those coming from the affordable up to lower mid-income, 2.5 to 7 million pesos per unit. That's why, again, when developers started to see that, what did they implement? Those attractive payment terms, ready for occupancy terms. That's why a lot of take-up, in fact, in the RFO segment are coming from these price segments, meaning affordable
Right.
to lower mid-income.
But this flexible payment terms, early move in, do you think this approach genuinely helps absorb supply or does it simply delay the market adjustment?
I think both. In fact, it helps the market, fully absorb the unsold units until, as we mentioned, 7.9 years, and we can't deny the fact that it will probably take more time, for the market to fully absorb, sell out the condos because, again, in fact, for 2026, there will be about 14,000 new units that will be completed. And that's pretty significant, about double compared to what we saw being completed in Metro Manila in 2025. So again, once those units are turned over and then you don't have a buyer or a renter, again, that will increase vacancy in the secondary market, right? So especially, I think I want to highlight this also, the vacancy in the secondary market, meaning condos have been turned over already, and the buyers are looking for a renter or another buyer, meaning if you flip it and then there's another individual willing to buy it in the secondary market, the vacancy right now across Metro Manila is 25%. But, of course, it's no longer surprising to see the Bay Area recording an elevated vacancy, almost 60%. So, that's where the
But Bay Area is another case because they were like in a bubble during the time of POGO. So, which leads me to my next question. Let's talk about POGO and its effect. At one point, offshore gaming companies were major drivers demand for both residential and
even
office spaces in Metro Manila. So looking back now, did the industry overestimate how sustainable these types of demand are, like with the Chinese gaming, or without really being too political? What are factors to sustain these types of market?
Did the industry overbuild? I won't say the entire industry in general, but some developers, yes, definitely. Certain developers overbuilt condominiums as well as office towers during that period, 2017 to 2019. If you look at the POGO sector in general, this was a subsegment that occupied 1.2 million square meters of office space in Metro Manila in 2019, height of POGO demand. And at the time, the POGOs were actually occupying 10% of the total leasable office space in Metro Manila. So just imagine a new entrant in the market, right? And then I'm not sure, Richard, if you're also into office leasing, but a lot of my colleagues made the killing during that period. Single transaction, 20,000, 10,000 square meters of office space required by these POGOs.
Because prior to the entrance of POGO in the Philippine market, we were doing okay with the BPOs.
Exactly.
The business process outsourcing was one of the strongest drivers in terms of the real estate demand. And then like the POGO kind of shaken things up.
Exactly.
Because they were like playing in a different level, like the pricing, the demand. Like it's something I think we were not really ready.
And really elevated rents at the time. And rents not just in the office sector, but also in the residential segment. And again, if you look at the Metro Manila office market at that time, vacancy, Richard, was about 5-6%. That was 2017 to 2019 on an annual basis. And then, of course, you know what happened at the height of the pandemic, 2020. So we were not allowed to go out. We were implementing work from home. So office vacancies definitely increased, almost doubled in 2020. Right now, we're at about 20%. And that's, again, no longer surprising given that the POGOs have vacated about 1.2 million square meters of office space, around that figure, 1 million, because, again, we have an anti-POGO law that is in effect signed by President Marcos. In fact, just in our building, 2 floors were vacated by POGO companies a day after President Marcos announced in his SONA that he's banning POGO operations in the Philippines. So, again, if you look at certain locations, the Bay Area at the time, the vacancy in the Bay Area was about 5-6%. Now, the vacancy in the Bay Area is about 40%.
Oh, I get.
And Makati CBD at the time, vacancy less than 1%. Right now, vacancy in Makati CBD about 9%.
But honestly, I do feel somehow, in my personal opinion, as a real estate consultant, I do feel that whatever is the pricing now is like the real price. So we are more of like in a correctional scenario, you know?
I agree.
Yeah.
We are correcting in a good way,
Yes.
Richard. I agree. I would say that it's a more organic
Yeah, more
level
organic.
of demand,
Yes.
right? It's not just, organic encounters that we all desire, but even in terms of office space demand, residential demand, we're probably entering that organic level. Remember, in the pre-selling unit, as I mentioned, 2017 to 2019, on an annual basis, imagine launches take up of 58,000 condominium units. I'm talking about pre-selling,
Yes.
Richard. So that's pretty significant.
And there was a real estate growth of 28% year on year. So
yeah.
right now we only have like 6, 7. We're lucky to have 7%
And
growth.
imagine 2017 to 2019, again, 59,000. Right now, 2024, 2025, what are the numbers? 10, 11, 12,000. So I think we can say that, again, it's the more organic demand that we're seeing right now. But I want to support this statement that, yes, we're seeing numbers stabilizing, normalizing in an organic way in Metro Manila because, especially for the residential sector, developers are not launching a lot in Metro Manila, but they have been implementing diversification programs. And when I talk about diversification programs, they now do geographic diversification. So, of course, developers previously were primarily located in Metro Manila. They have been launching more projects outside of the capital region. I'll give an example, Richard. SMDC. If you look at SMDC or any developer, for instance, if you look at this 3.2 to say 6 million pesos lower mid-income price segment, you might see some challenges when you launch a similar project in Metro Manila.
Right, I agree.
Right? But what have we seen? SMDC, when they launch in Angeles in Pampanga, same price point, 3.2 million a unit. Under the pre-selling stage, 1,741 units, 10 condominium towers sold out.
Wow.
So, again, you now see that while there are some challenges in Metro Manila, when you go outside of the capital region, there are opportunities. And it's not just condominium. For example, DMCI also launched a condotel, 4 towers in San Juan, Batangas, leisure-oriented. I understand that's about 6 to 7 million pesos a unit. And that's sold out.
Yes. And a lot of developers have been launching in Batangas. No, I really do think that it's the next hotspot, especially Lipa.
Yeah, not just condominium or condotel, even lot only. Rockwell, for example.
Yes, of course.
Right? Bulacan. Rockwell also, in fact, the Samanian project by Rockwell, the lot-only project, the first phase is sold out. And in just a year, that project recorded a 15% price increase. So you're now seeing that there are other growth drivers, of course.
And when I got my lot from Rockwell in Lipa, we really had to line up. Like it was like 7 in the morning during the launch and I ended around 7 in the evening in Lawan, the property with the Taal view. So is there like developers match because they were developing like smaller units in Metro Manila, like studio units, because that's what's more affordable than what the buyer would actually want to buy today or in today's market.
That yes, we have seen that. But I don't want to get into trouble, so I'm not gonna name the developers.
Yeah, of
but
course.
I think they're pretty obvious. Just look at the locations. As I mentioned earlier, the industry did it overdevelop as an industry, real estate sector. No, but there are certain developers, yes, overdeveloped office buildings as well as residential projects during that period. I think it's the strike while the iron is hot mentality, mindset. That's why they launch a lot of projects during that time. But the question at the time was, when will the market eventually stabilize? Because we have seen prices at the time really growing at a steady or even at a very steep pace, very fast pace. The pandemic happened, so pandemic resulted in correction of condominium prices across Metro Manila. We saw a slowdown in terms of net demand, even launches. Developers are not launching a lot right now. And as I mentioned, because they're seeing opportunities.
Yeah.
One concern that we have here is that in Metro Manila, when you launch a condominium, how much revenues can you generate in a single condominium tower? Say 5-6 billion. But of course, if you launch lot-only house and lot projects outside of Metro Manila, given that these are horizontal, how many projects or how many hectares of land do you need to be able to generate 5-6 billion in revenues, right, for a single project? But I think, Richard, as I mentioned, that developers are actually doing that. Imagine Federal Land Nomura. Federal Land Nomura, they have the observatory
in Mandaluyong.
Condominium, that's correct. And then Seasons Residences for Bonifacio.
Yes.
But they also launched the 600-hectare master plan community in General Trias, Cavite. And that's pretty significant, right? Of course, Villar Land also launching its massive integrated community, Villar City. That's how many? 3,500 hectares, if I'm not mistaken. Really a huge master plan development. Again, not only these developers. When you go to Clark, for example, you have the Han Group.
Oh yeah,
right? So, interesting. This is an interesting developer. Of course, Mr. Han from Korea.
Yes.
And they launch their own micro township where they have
Sun
a lot of
Valley?
Swiss Hotel,
Yes.
Marriott, right? What did they do? They even expanded further up north to New Clark City. And then what did they also do? They had to rename or reclassify their property from being a tourism-oriented zone to an economic zone. Why? Because they're now looking at housing even data centers. Again, these are the developments that we have been seeing, and it's actually a very interesting time.
But in terms
the
of
Philippine
like
property.
Central Luzon being a hotspot,
That's
and
right.
then Batangas, and then you also have like Cebu, Davao. What makes this region particularly attractive for future real estate
Central
development?
Luzon?
Yeah, especially Central Luzon. Of course, we know the Clark Airport is there. It's highly rated,
Yeah.
But
I really try to be objective here, Richard. I am
Yes.
Kapampangan.
I am as well. No, mainit pero
yes.
yes.
But Central Luzon really is a growing destination. You have the major developers already there. Of course, you have Ayala Land, you have Rockwell in Angeles, right? Imagine having the first power plant mall outside of Metro Manila next year, 2027. You even have Centrala, which is near the San Fernando station of the North-South Commuter Railway. Of course, Alviera by Ayala Land also. I think this is one location that we saw this coming because previously, when you look at Metro Manila, of course, there are a lot of new projects being launched left and right, even micro townships. I think at that time, it was very sensible for developers to first launch in Bulacan, right? Because if you're driving up north, the central Luzon, it's Bulacan first and then Pampanga.
Yes.
But due to some challenges, I heard that because of land acquisition, meaning consolidation of land for various master plan communities development, there were some challenges in consolidating these parcels of land. So the developers somehow bypassed Bulacan and went straight to Pampanga. So that's when we saw marquee residences, for example, the Ayala Land project in Angeles City. I mean, at the time I would pass through and Lex, who would think that a condominium project would actually be viable in
the middle
Angeles City, right? Exactly.
SCTEX, right?
Exactly. And then, but in Angeles City or in Pampanga, what do you have right now? Again, you have Rockwell. I think Rockwell already launched its third condominium tower in Angeles City. And then you have, of course, the Marquee Residences and Condominium by Ayala. Century Properties also is there. Mega World in San Fernando, capital town, the former Paso Deco. So a lot of interesting developments. And I always say this, Richard, and apologies for the Kapampangan reference, but Pampanga's property market is really sizzling. It's like our favorite sisig, right? And the property market in Pampanga, similar to the trajectory of airplanes taking off from the runway of Clark Airport, it's nowhere to go but up.
And the way developers are moving in regions like Central Luzon, it's like slowly but surely compared how they did it in Metro Manila, where in all at once, let's launch all together. I think this time they're able to correct some strategies.
Yeah, I actually, Richard, if I may share this, golf communities are very attractive developments these days. So you have, of course, again, that Han project in Clark Freeport and then New Clark City, and Santa Lucia also in Pampanga with its community. It's a trend right now. And of course, given the terrain in Pampanga and the interest overall from golfers, from investment-savvy players, we believe that this is another property type that will really grow and will really expand in Central Luzon, especially Pampanga moving forward.
I just hope that climate would get better. As hot as the property market, it's correlated to the weather as well. But going back to Metro Manila, like in terms of your outlook in 2025, wherein we heard the oversupply for the first time, and then now it's the second year that we're actually dealing with this. Is it better this year or compared to last year, or is it worse?
The only concern that we have for 2026 is that there will be sizable number of new condominium units that will be turned over. As I mentioned, so from 7,000 previously, we're now expecting how many? Say about 14,000 units that will be completed. But overall, from 2026 to 2028, there will be about 7,000 new condominium units that will be completed. So we're now seeing a tempered completion, Richard, because number one, developers have really extended their construction, their down payment period, talking about 2021, 2022. So the projects that will likely be completed 2027, 2028 are these projects that were launched at the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. I think 2021 was, I would say, a game-changing year in terms of launches, because that was a period when we saw a lot of turnover, backouts in the market. And of course, developers know that, they are aware of that. So after that period, that was in fact third quarter of 2021. I remember, Richard, because this is a key indicator that I always use whenever I do presentations. For example, if first 6 months, first 2 quarters of 2021, if your average net take-up, net demand was 12,000, by the third quarter, instead of increasing, that declined to 10,000. Why? Because of backouts. Right? So that was really a game-changing year for the pre-selling sector in Metro Manila. That's why after that year, 2022, developers really had to be more careful. They really had to temper their launches. And as a result, say after 5-6 years from being launched in the market, we're now seeing tempered, stifled turnover.
This is
of
very
those years.
interesting because I'm a consultant for the top developers in the
Yes.
country, diba?
Yes.
And one of the problems talaga is back out.
That's correct.
So even before the turnover, or sometimes even just months after purchasing the property. So I was actually recommending, what if we increase the down payment, then people were able to qualify more people, whether they can really sustain these types of investments, or sometimes it would make them think whether they would just want to like throw away whatever money they put in. I know it's kind of like harsh, but sometimes you know, as a consultant, you have to create solutions for certain problems. So
No, but actually, Richard, that is a common concern that we have when we talk to developers also.
yes.
Do we raise the down payment? Because I think that's one way of really filtering those that can buy the condo, that
Yes.
have the money to continue with their loan for more than 5 years, not just during the down payment period, right? Once it enters bank financing, they have the money actually to pay for the monthly amortization. I think that's a very good way to filter out those who can really afford and those who cannot. And I think for developers right now, given that they're faced with the reality of tempered launches and take up 30,000 unsold RFO units in Metro Manila, it's really important that they see that type of demand, that end user demand, that organic demand, not the speculative demand that we used to see in the market, which we saw from 2017 up to early part of 2020.
Yes. And when you say like there's 30,000 unsold RFO units, it might cause alarm to a lot of people because in other markets like in the US, a lot of housing inventory would cause recession. But I do feel that, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I do feel that as long as the developers could hold on to these units and they have the liquidity to sustain their businesses, I think we're doing okay.
They
as
are
as an economy, you know.
Yeah, of course, some developers are very liquid. I think, Richard, what we have learned also from previous crisis. So you have Asian financial crisis, global financial crisis.
I was 9 back then.
Don't ask for my age. Don't let me carbon date myself. But I think during those years, what's important is that we look at the dynamics and what did they learn from that period. Well, they learned that it is important, of course, to also have a good source of recurring income.
Right.
Because if your pre-selling residential market is not doing well, you have other sources of income, of revenues, recurring income generating assets. You have malls, for example, hotels, what else? Say golf club shares, for example. Previously, Asian financial crisis, we know some developers that were affected by the AFC, especially those that were just focused on golf courses, right?
Splendido, in Tagaytay.
What are they doing? What did they learn from that lesson, from the bitter lesson of the Asian financial crisis? Now they're launching golf communities.
Right.
Of golf course, okay, and then what's complementing but is built adjacent to a golf course? You have lot-only projects, which are very attractive among end users. Then if you are awash with cash and you want to diversify, of course, you still buy a pre-selling condominium because you know that you can actually flip it to a foreign golfer that visits the golf course, right? I mean, there are a lot of opportunities at this point. And this is part of the diversification strategy that developers, in fact, have been implementing at this point.
Yes, but I guess like our listeners would really want to know the answer to the question. Is it still a good time to buy a condo in Metro Manila right now?
Richard, I get that question a lot. And whenever I answer that, some commenters on social media would say that, well, not so good things, nasty stuff. I think right now, Metro Manila, it's a very good time if you are an end user. Meaning, if you want to acquire these ready for occupancy condominium units and then you live in it because you want to be near your workplace, a university, for example, student-centric condominiums are very attractive these days, I think then you go acquire, buy it under the lease to own, ready for occupancy, renter to buyer promo. Now is an opportune time. If you're a renter, especially,
And it's really going to depend on your situation, your strategies.
That's
If
correct.
you have the liquidity, why not?
Exactly.
I still think that real estate is the best asset where to put your money. You
that's
know?
right, Richard. And of course, we agree. I agree. Also, developers are diversifying, right? They have been implementing a lot of diversification strategies. I think investors should also do that. Don't put all your eggs in one basket.
Right.
Maybe you buy a condo in Metro Manila, but you look for other properties outside of the capital region. I think what's very evident at this point is that, for example, if you're an affluent, astute, a discerning buyer, you're the type of investor that would acquire, say, a Rockwell condominium, a Balmori, for example, one of the most expensive right now, or just to be fair, other developments, say, a Lorian by Ayala Land Premier, a Park East Place by Alveo. Yes, these are very expensive already, but I think you also try to diversify while you acquire these projects in Metro Manila. And if you still have the funds, then you look for a lot only, say, some projects in Bulacan that have a very high price appreciation potential. In fact, when you go to Pampanga right now, I'm seeing some house lot only projects, residential lot only, priced at about what 15,000-20,000 pesos per square. I think that given these developments, proximity to the North-South Commuter Railway, MRT7, I think they have a very strong price appreciation potential. So
Yes.
really at this point, diversification is the name of the game, whether you're a developer or an investor.
Yes. So I have so much questions for you, but I think we're running out of time. So maybe I'll just ask
Yeah.
one more question. So what do you think property researchers like you or Colliers would like say about the Philippine real estate market 5 years from now? 5 years is
years
not
from
a very long time in real estate, Like I think the last interview it was 4 years ago.
Yes.
So like
So that's 2026 plus 5,
2031.
2031.
Yes.
I think for the property market in general, and I don't want to be political about this, but of course, if you are to invest, make sure you invest in a property that is near, in close proximity to a major public project. We always say this, Richard, and I think you'll agree that if you have a property near these projects, given the improving connectivity, prices will increase, rental prospects will also increase. And again, while we're seeing some political challenges, geopolitical issues globally or even locally, our Philippine politicians, of course, infrastructure will always be there and will always be built. One example that I have here, Richard, is the North-South Commuter Railway.
Yes.
If you've been to Clark, you probably saw
Yes.
all those major planks already built by Japan International Cooperation Agency, right? And its contractors. Those projects, those planks are unlikely to be pared down once we elect a new president in 2028, right? So definitely that project will continue. And again, it will have tremendous positive impacts on property. The only concern, again, that we have here is that I hope these flood control issues are eventually thrashed out, solved, because, again, even if that project is funded by JICA or ADB, any institutional lender, if the government does not set aside its counterpart funding for that project, then that project will be delayed. I'm reading reports that because the government previously failed to allocate its counterpart funding for the subway will now be delayed to 2032.
Oh really?
When its original date of completion is 2028. That I've been reading some reports. No? So I hope, of course, that we really fix this issue right
it's
now.
causing so much traffic in Ortigas. I don't want to like spend another 4 years going around
exactly.
Capital
And
Commons because of the road closure
just
for
look
the
at
subways.
Ortigas, Richard. Ortigas will have 2 subway stations.
Yes, north and south.
Right?
Yes.
In fact, I have this as an anecdote. I always use this as an anecdote. I have a friend who works for Alveo. One time he told me, Joey, I was able to sell 6 3BR units of Park East Place. Oh, that's
Wow.
impressive. How did you do it? Easy. I just showed my British investors your ANC interview saying and discussing the impacts of the Metro Manila subway on condo prices, on connectivity, and given that, of course, Park East Place is near the one of the subway stations, right? So and these are not bluff, and British investors they have seen a very mature market, and they know that this isn't bluff, and they have experienced this. So they really acquire these units. And I think, for brokers, that's one tip that I can give them.
Yes, I think also the local market is forgetting that real estate is actually a long-term play.
That's
it's a long-term game.
That's correct.
So we were lucky enough to get some opportunities in a very short time pre-pandemic, but
Yes.
really as an asset, it's really long-term. So yes.
Sorry, Richard. I just want to
Right.
mention this also because POGOs we no longer have in the Philippine market. What do we have right now in the office sector? The global capability centers. So they are likes of Wells Fargo, the shared service
Yes.
of Coca-Cola. They have been occupying 10, 15,000 square meters of office space. And as I mentioned, we believe that is a more organic demand driver in office space. Why is this also important for brokers like you? Because what we have seen right now, and I think you'll agree, there's a dearth, meaning lack of listing for the large 3BR, 2BR condo
Yes.
units. When you go to Fort Bonifacio, Ortigas Center, Makati, CBD, right? So given that there will be a lot of luxury, ultra luxury condos that will be completed, and they will be having and offering these large condo cuts, and then you have growing global capability centers, shared service companies in the Philippines who will have expats, foreign employees. That's a market for you.
And there will be more in the next few years.
Exactly.
Yeah, with the opening of Bridgetown
That's
and
correct.
Parklinks.
Oh, Bridgetown. Yes, we actually use that as an example, especially the Velaris project,
Yeah,
Robinson's
Velaris. I
Hong
love
Kong
it.
land.
Yeah.
I think right now, and if I may add this also, these projects, 50, 100 million pesos per unit, you look for the amenities.
Yes.
After sales service, because right now what I have observed is that when I visit the showroom as well as the property briefings, exhibits of all these premium developers, they really put a premium and a spot on the amenities that they provide. 2, even 3 floors of amenities. That is pretty significant, right? And I think really need to, if you're a buyer, maximize on these amenities.
And
being
amenities
offered.
are different post-pandemic.
Oh.
The designs are just, really like fully deliverable.
I remember,
space,
Richard,
not only the unit itself.
Right now, we're seeing, what are the amenities? We have a glamping nook. What is a glamping nook? So I even
Yeah,
have to Google image it.
We have in the one, and then we also have like an outdoor onsen. I think
Yeah,
Asento.
Yeah,
in
large
Velaris.
spaces. You have a
Yes.
golf simulator.
Yeah,
right?
golf
Now, again,
simulator.
because a lot of people are playing golf, right? So
And then they have like water floating beds in a condominium. I was like,
and then you
wow.
have a bar.
Yes. So
Crazy, but
it's
yeah.
just, like you just really have to choose the right
That's
investment.
right. And look for these amenities. Be really discerning. I mean, you're investing 50, 100,
Yes.
100 million pesos of your hard-earned money, right? So might as well look for the premium amenities and top-notch after-sale services.
Yes. Thank you so much,
Of course,
Joey, for
Richard.
being
Thank
here. Thank
you.
you for sharing your insights today on the Metro Manila condominium market, POGO, impact on real estate, and the future of property investment in the Philippines. Conversations like this help real estate investors, developers, and professionals like us better understand the forces shaping our cities. And again, this episode was brought to you by iAcademy, a leading institution for real estate management education in the Philippines with consistently strong board exam performance. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you in the next episode of the Real Pro Podcast.